It's time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Property Podcast. I'm Rob B, with me is Rob D, and this is episode 141. 141, Rob, can you believe it?
I can't believe it, and you know what else I can't believe? We've got to episode 141 without dedicating a whole episode to the London property market. What's all that about?
We say this every week. I can't believe we've done this far without... There's so much to cover, that's the beauty of it. I was thinking in the last 24 hours, as you do, and I was thinking, I wonder how many podcasts we'll end up doing, but we are nowhere near close to running out of topics to cover. If we're already doing London now, then, you know, by episode 600 we can do like Scunthorpe and, you know, we'll be fine.
Yeah, but I think by the time we get to that, please email us and tell us to call it a day if we start doing an episode on that. I think you hear a lot about London anyway, but there's a reason for that. It's relevant for the whole country and beyond. So that's why we're going to be talking about it today. Now, topically, I'm in London at the moment, but Rob, you're not. What's up? Where are you? What are you up to?
I'm in Leeds, which is a great city. I love Leeds. And doing some planning sessions with the RMP team, which is great, but also... because they're so closely tied to Yellow and all the content stuff we do, it's been great big picture stuff over the last, 24 hours and the next 24 hours, so that's really cool. And then we're going to be meeting up with the Yellow team in a couple of weeks, which I'm really excited about as well. But we'll do some planning and also a bit of partying, so that'll be really good. So enjoy my time in Leeds, back home soon. Next week I'll be back in Hertfordshire. So, been a good time. Rob, you may be in London, but you have been a busy boy.
Yeah, I have been on lockdown trying to edit the book. I've mentioned this book a few times, and I don't feel like it's any nearer to being ready than when I first mentioned it on the podcast. It always happens. I'll write it. I'll do the first draft to go, brilliant, it's written now. Now it's just a little bit of editing, and then the editing takes forever. But it's coming along really nicely. I'm super excited about it. We've got it targeted for a January launch, hopefully, but I do need to actually get it finished. But I'm very, very excited about it. My previous book was Property Investment for Beginners, which was, pretty short and to the point. And off the back of that, I've been asked hundreds of questions. And this new book is answering all of those questions and putting it all into context with the big picture, with strategies and goals and all the rest of it. That's why it ended up being quite long. So it's taking forever to do, but I'm very excited about it. I'm also just a bit concerned that I'm going to go mad before it actually gets done. But that's what I've been doing this week. So I'm in London, but quite frankly, I could have been anywhere because all I've done is stare at a screen.
Yeah, when we caught up about the book a week or so ago, I got really excited because the stuff you're covering is, it's pretty obvious, but stuff I really enjoy and get excited about in property. So I know already, although I haven't read it, waiting for my copy, hint, hint. I know it'll be great.
Well, yeah, this is the thing. When we spoke about it a few weeks ago, I said, I'll just get that section over to you because I want your input. I still haven't finished it. But it's going to get there. It's going to get there. Right.
But what will get here immediately is our main topic this week, and it's London. We love talking about London. We may not always give it the best press, Rob, but we certainly have got a few opinions on the subject.
Yeah, well, we mention it in passing all the time, but as we said, we've not dedicated a whole episode to it. But yeah, we are perhaps mildly obsessed, but then so's the whole of the media. You probably read about it all the time. Prices going up here, prices going down there. All these stories about how no one could afford to live there anymore. We did one a couple of weeks back about how people were queuing around the block for a studio flat in some place in Zone 3. And probably in the world around you when you're out if you're at a dinner party or you're at a pub or whatever, it's probably something that people talk about there as well. So think about this as your virtual audio dinner party, and we will be the bores talking about the London property market. And maybe you'll learn an opinion that you can recycle as your own and seem smart, or maybe you'll just think we're completely wrong about everything. But we're happy to take that chance. We should start really about talking about what's happened so far put it into context, and then we can move from what's happened to where we are now to the dangerous bit, which is what we think is going to happen next.
So looking back's easy. Up until 2008, when the property market crashed, London, like everywhere else, was doing great. And then the market crashed, and London crashed, along with everywhere else. Now, it's interesting. I have already met a lot of people, it's only 7 years ago, who say, yeah, but London didn't crash. It did. And what surprises those people I then inform them that it did crash is that actually London, as a region, in percentage terms, fell harder than anywhere else. It's obviously recovered, which we'll come to, but London, in terms of how deep the percentage cuts went, if you look at the graphs across all the regions, London fell harder than anywhere else, and then it recovered, Rob.
It did, and it's funny that you say how everyone's got a short memory, because I was the same when you mentioned a while back on the podcast that how London had crashed pretty much harder than anywhere else, and that had completely passed me by, even though I was buying in London just after the crash, and I was the only one. You're like a minor celebrity when you walk into an estate agent's office because there's no one was in the market. But then that didn't last very long at all, because London recovered faster than anywhere else. There are plenty of places, which gets forgotten, that still haven't recovered. You hear all this stuff about average house prices in the UK, but because London and the South East makes up such a large part of the average, even if prices are up, it masks the fact that there are places in the northwest, there are places in Yorkshire, there's northeast, there's Wales, where prices are still down on where they were before. In London, however, up 31.6% from its previous peak. And its previous peak was pretty high. It's gone up another third from there, which is just amazing. This means basically, if you've bought in London in the past, you've probably done pretty well, even if you bought at, in property cycle terms, the absolute peak of the winner's curse. You might have had an iffy couple of years, but even now, you've probably done quite well. So it did fall, no doubt about that, but the extent to which it's recovered, and perhaps we can talk a bit about why that has happened, is extraordinary.
Yeah, and we have pulled a lot of this data from different sources. So if you'd like the links to some of the data that we're talking about, make sure you pick up the show notes this week. It's thepropertyhub.net what next for London. So it's thepropertyhub.net/what next for London. And we'll link to all these resources we're using today. And one of the resources we're using is from the FT, and it's about what's happening now, because like property in general, everyone has an opinion on London, so it's really interesting to see actually what's happening. And everyone says prime London is suffering. You know, the general market's okay at the moment, but the first wobble has happened in prime London. And that's really driven by the fact that the overseas buyers are leaving, and that's what this article in the FT covers. What's amazing, Rob, is that of prime London property, only 42% of it is bought by UK nationals. So 58% is bought by internationals, overseas buyers, which is just incredible. Now, that's actually fallen, so the percentage was actually higher at 64%. So that shows they are exiting the market. But up until recently, nearly 10% of transactions in prime London were from Chinese buyers, not Asian, just Chinese buyers were making up 10% of the whole London prime market. But as we know, China's wobbling, which is something we've talked about and predicted, I might add, and it hasn't crashed yet, but it may well do, and I wouldn't be surprised if it did. That's gone down from nearly 10% to 3% now. So the buyers have been cut by 2/3, and I think that will continue. Russian buyers as well have started exiting the market. It's unbelievable how much the overseas buyers are influencing the London market. And while it's happening in prime, we'll talk about what we think for the future. I think it could have an effect on the other parts of the London market in the near future.
But yeah, those overseas buyers, in my opinion, were a large part of the reason why London recovered so quickly and then ended up passing its previous peak. Because when the crash happened, there really wasn't much in the world that appeared to be safe, and returns were pretty low across the board. So London was basically where everyone stuck their money. And this is something I've talked about before, about how sort of prime London stopped being a property market and it was just kind of a store of cash for wealthy individuals from around the world. And now what we're seeing is as different asset classes recover and as parts of the world like China kind of get into trouble and people maybe are less cash rich than they were, that reversal has happened. And as we had like a ripple effect when that investment first came in, so people were priced out of prime London, moved a bit further out, those people moved a bit further out, we could then be seeing a reverse ripple from there. But that's more for the future. In terms of where we are now, well, London is the most unaffordable city on the planet is where we are now. According to UBS, this is a story that we talked about last week. We'll put it in the show notes again for this episode. But yeah, in terms of if you are a London local earning a sort of a regular kind of wage, it is the most unaffordable city on the planet. So that's where we are. Nobody can afford to buy here. As an investment, if you're looking for any kind of yield, it's not really there. And the foreign buyers are on the retreat. Does that mean that there's a crash to come? Well, you would have thought so on the basis of what we've just said, but it's a lot more subtle than that, really. And we don't have an absolute set in stone conclusion, do we?
No, we don't. This is the part now where we will look forward, where we've looked at the past, we definitely know what's happened. We look at what's happening now. Yeah, we've got pretty much a handle on that. But what's going to happen in the future? We've made a fair few predictions on the London property market, and will we be right? Will we be wrong? Well, only time will tell. What I think certain, we were discussing this before we turned the microphones on, is that neither of us will be investing in London in any point in the near future. Will we invest in London again? Absolutely, when the cycle's right. But right now, as it has done for the last 12, 18 months, London makes me very nervous. And there's so much value elsewhere in comparison to London. Now, we talked about areas that haven't got back to their previous peaks yet. That's because they're following the normal cycle. So the Northwest on average and Yorkshire on average, as Rob said, is still 6% off the previous peak. So that's got so much further to go yet. Whereas London fell and then is a third higher than where it was on the last peak, over 30% higher. It's crazy. So what should you do? If you're investing in London now, do you stop? Well, I'm not going to tell you to do that because each to their own, and your approach and your strategy will be different to the next person you meet. If you're thinking about selling, should you? I'd say never sell a property because London will absolutely come back because the supply and demand issues are not going to go away. But if you're making your first investment, would I go into London? I personally wouldn't, and I'm not investing in London right now, and in the short term have no intention to. But if the market corrects, I'm all in. What about you, Rob?
Well, I was talking to some people about this the other day, and I was trying really hard not to be the sort of pub boss / prophet of doom talking about London. But it's kind of hard because if we look at the evidence, it's like, well, nobody who needs to live in London can afford to buy in London. If you're an investor and you're looking for a return, that return pretty much isn't there. You're only buying with capital growth in mind. And I think people still want to invest in London because there's the perception of London is the place where prices always go up most. So if capital growth is part of your plan, you think, well, then I should be buying in London. But the reason that I'm dubious about that is because there is surely only so far that it can go up before it stops making sense for anyone. If you're at the point where only overseas investors are buying as somewhere to store their cash, then there's going to be some kind of ceiling. And I'm not saying that there's going to be a massive correction. Maybe there is. We've said before that when even in kind of property cycle terms, you've got people saying it's all going to be different this time and this is the new normal. That's a big warning sign. You've had Europe's tallest building announced, another classic property signal sign. Maybe there is a correction to be had, but I'm not sure about that. But what I'm fairly confident in saying is that I think that it will slow down and perhaps there will be more growth in other parts of the country. So where it's decoupled and you've got London racing away doing its own thing and the rest of the country lagging behind, I think those two might converge a little bit more. So I wouldn't be buying in London right now, not for any reason other than the fact that there is no real return to be made anywhere that I've seen in terms of your yield, which means you're basically solely sort of hoping that interest rates stay low and gambling on the capital growth. And I think there are other places where you can get the capital growth without all of that risk.
Yeah, we talked about prime London wobbling. Well, that could trickle down, and it may well trickle down. I wouldn't be surprised if it did to the mainstream London market, because international buyers haven't just invested in prime. They've invested in general London as well, wherever general is. So if they have, and they start to exit as well, will prices soften? Will they crash? I'm not sure. But like Rob said, big correction, maybe not, but soften, stall, slight dip, I wouldn't be surprised. When will it happen? That, my friends, is what we cannot answer. If it will happen as well, we cannot answer. We've only got hunches, backed by good sources and reasonable knowledge, but at best an educated guess. Looking into the future can make you look very, very silly. So we probably, Rob, should quit while we're ahead.
Yeah, I think that would probably be a wise idea. So I think if we could sum that up, probably don't panic, but be cautious would be the take-home message from that. And I'd say don't invest in London just because it's London. I mean, the nice thing about it is if you're thinking about fundamentals, then it's like, well, where the jobs are, where everyone wants to be, rental demand is not going to be a problem. They are very nice factors. They're great reasons to invest in London. But you know what? There are other places in the country that tick those boxes as well. So if you've got a reason to invest in London, fine. If you own property in London, don't panic, but don't feel like London is the only option. If you'd like to check out some of the data that we talked about in this episode, we're going to link to it all. The place to go is thepropertyhub.net/whatnext for London.
Okay, so that's London. Moving into a different topic, but still staying with property. Do you self-manage? Now, if you do, don't worry, we're not going to come around and tell you off for not using yellow lettings. Quite the opposite, actually. We have an opportunity for people who self-manage to be featured in the Property Hub magazine. Yes, you could be famous. We want you. If you self-manage, we want to build case studies around you, why you've done it, how you found it, lessons learned, all that type of stuff. So if you're interested, we'd love to hear from you. Rob, what's the best way to get in touch?
The easiest thing to do is probably just to send an email to hello@thepropertyhub.net. So if you've got any emails from us recently up, maybe you've got an email telling you that this episode had come out, you can just hit reply to that email and that's the address it will go to. So just send email hello@thepropertyhub.net and the lovely Abby will get in touch with you, tell you a little bit more, and you can decide whether you want to be involved. So if you're not sure, don't feel like emailing is going to be committing, but just don't be shy to sort of say, yeah, I'm interested in finding out a bit more. Abby will tell you the rest and you can decide from there.
Okay, coming up, we've got a great resource of the week and we'll let you know about next week's conversation and topic. But before that, we have a review. And if we could get a round of applause, please, because this is a lovely one. It says, what are there to say about the previous 300 5-star reviews haven't said? For me, this is the best property podcast to listen to. Insightful, thought-provoking, and more importantly, useful. It provides a wealth of knowledge and saved me a boatload of cash as I've completed my first, of hopefully many, buy-to-let properties. Many thanks and keep up the good work, Rob and Rob. Thank you very much. And that actually comes from James, who produces the Graduate Job podcast. And James recently interviewed me for that podcast where I gave my thoughts on recruitment. Now, I've done a lot with Rob of recruitment. In Yellow, in RMP, we've done a lot for the Hub. We've seen some great people, and we were now fortunate to work with some great people. But we've seen some terrible candidates as well. For those who are interested in business or recruitment, or if you're looking to get employment yourselves in property or just any line of work and you want some hints and tips, I think you'll find it useful. I certainly enjoyed it, so thanks, James, for recording that one with me.
I'm looking forward to hearing it. I hope you've toned down your rants a little bit from the conversations that we have around some of the people, because it's never that they're bad people, it's just that they just don't know how to put themselves forward in the right way, and so it's just so frustrating because you just want to be blown away by all the applications and you're not because of these really simple mistakes. But anyway, I won't go into that because I'm sure that you do, and I'll be listening to that. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Oh, I've got a recent one. So, just one example of a terrible application form. I'm obviously not going to name names. Questions. And then the one question where you can stand out, because the others is just your name, your email. What's one thing you've been really good at in your career and one thing you found challenging in your career? And the person wrote sales. That was the answer. Well, I can definitely agree you found it challenging, because that is terrible, selling yourself. But yeah, that was the answer. Apparently, the best and worst of their career is the same thing.
Oh dear. Okay, well, let's move swiftly on, but the link to that podcast will be in the show notes, as will the resource of the week. This week comes courtesy of my wife, who found this one and recommended it to us. So this is one for listeners who've got kids, maybe teenagers, who are starting to have their own bank account and manage their own money. And this is a tool called OSPA, which is designed, it's a prepaid debit card that's designed to make it easy for kids to manage their money and for parents to basically keep an eye on it. So the idea is it's a debit card backed up with an app, and it means that they can go on there and check their balance, have savings goals and all that kind of thing. And then the parents could maybe load their pocket money on there, keep an eye on what they've been spending and all that kind of thing. So it's not something that I've used because I don't have children, but it's something that I certainly will use when I do, because it just seems like a really great way of giving kids responsibility in a safe way and encouraging them to think about all this financial stuff and investing and all the rest of it, which is obviously so important. And we've talked at length before about where the education system has failed people in thinking about all this stuff.
Yeah, my 4-year-old son, whenever he gets hold of a phone, clearly he doesn't have his own, is mostly interested in Paw Patrol and Peppa Pig. So I think he's a little too young just now, but certainly one I will introduce him to in the future when he does get his own phone. But actually, I've seen the way he takes about 1 million photos on my phone whenever he gets his muggy hands on them, so it'll probably be when he's 18. But yeah, it looks like a really good app.
Okay, so that is just about us for this week. Next week, well, we've already been talking about what we think is going to come next for London and running the risk of making ourselves look silly. Why don't we double down on that, Rob?
Yeah, so because we clearly don't listen to our own advice, we're going to make a load of predictions for next year. And just to make ourselves look really silly, look back at our predictions from last year. So that's next week's podcast. We're going to make predictions for the coming property year. We've done this for the last couple of years now. And actually, to be fair to us, we've actually done okay. We've not done too bad with the old predictions, but have we continued that trend? Will we continue that trend? Will you agree? Will you disagree? Join us next week to find out.
Yes, we look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, the show notes are at propertyhub.net/whatnextforlondon. So a little light reading for you if you're into your stats and all that kind of thing regarding London. We will be back next Tuesday with the Ask Rob and Rob podcast. And then we'll be back with a property podcast next Thursday. So until then, have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves them more than air miles.